Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed,
where we break down the world's news from every angle.
from the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thanks for listening.
I'm Nina.
And I'm Jules.
And we'll be your hosts for today's news collection.
Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're taking an in-depth look at this incredible stack of sources you've shared with us. We're covering, well, pretty much everything from the silent hum of gravitational waves deep in space, all the way to the clamor of political protests down here on Earth. And from the big challenges of exploring space to the shifting sands of global diplomacy. Our mission, well, it's to help you cut through all that noise, understand the most important nuggets, and crucially connect the dots. Because let's face it, the world is constantly in motion.
It really is. And we'll be exploring the why behind the what, looking at things from multiple perspectives and uncovering insights that, well, they might just surprise you. We've got scientific breakthroughs pushing humanity forward, and at the same time, these intense geopolitical tensions shaping our future. It's all on the table for us to unpack together.
All right, let's dig in then. We're talking about groundbreaking science, obviously, but also these escalating global conflicts that are literally redrawing lines and alliances as we speak. Economic shifts that definitely hit close to home for a lot of people, and even some really fascinating insights into human behavior and the health of our planet. It's this vast, intricate tapestry, And like always, every thread connects in ways we might not see at first glance. So yeah, grab your favorite beverage, get comfortable. Because we're about to journey through the latest, most impactful stories happening right now across our shared planet. Let's kick things off by looking up, way up, to the new frontier, space exploration. It's not just about pure scientific discovery anymore, is it? It's rapidly becoming this new arena for global competition. And that competition, it seems to be heating up significantly, especially around the moon. Our sources show that China and Russia are actively collaborating, working together on establishing a lunar research base, which, immediately makes you ask, where do other nations stand in all this? Particularly the United States in this renewed space race.
That's a key point. And a crucial insight here is how foundational research, something like bioregenerative life support systems, BLSS for short, it's not just about space travel. It's actually about sustainable living, whether that's, on a future lunar base or right here on Earth. Our sources really highlight a significant concern here. The United States, right now, seems to be facing limitations. Why? Because of insufficient support for this specific bioregenerative life support research. There's even a paper published in MPJ Microgravity, and this is interesting. It includes researchers from NASA facilities, that's the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, detailing this disadvantage.
Okay, BLSS, Bioregenerative Life Support Systems. So if this tech is really the game changer for living on the moon long term, what does that mean for the U.S.'s own space ambitions? Are they keeping pace? Is this a critical lag? And maybe could you give us a quick example? How could a lunar BLSS system actually help us back here? Maybe improve desert farming or change how cities handle waste?
All right, that's a really powerful two-part question. Let's take the first part. The implications for the U.S. are pretty substantial. Look at current space missions. Even sophisticated ones like the International Space Station. They largely rely on regular resupply missions. Think constant deliveries.
Like needing Amazon Prime delivery to the moon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Slight chuckle. For essentials like water, food, it's incredibly expensive and logistically just mind-bogglingly complex when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of miles. BLSS, though, offers something different, a sustainable closed-loop environment.
Meaning it recycles everything.
Pretty much. Using biological organisms, think plants, maybe algae, even microbes, to recycle waste, generate oxygen, produce food. You're effectively creating a mini ecosystem in space that could theoretically sustain itself for years. And those NASA researchers you mentioned, they themselves express worry, funding cuts, lack of prioritization in these specific technologies. It's left the U.S. at a disadvantage. China, for example, is increasingly adopting BLSS. That gives them a clear leg up for establishing truly sustainable long-term lunar outposts. The paper explicitly says, to enhance its lunar capabilities, the U.S. must innovate and reinvest in BLSS. Now, for the earthbound benefits, your second point, think about an extreme environment like a desert. A closed-loop BLSS system developed for the harshness of the moon. It could be adapted. You could create highly efficient greenhouses that recycle almost all their water right there in arid regions.
Yeah.
That could dramatically increase food security.
Okay, I see that.
Or urban waste management. BLS's principles could inspire advanced bioconversion systems, systems that turn organic waste not into landfill, but into reusable resources, reducing pollution. It's really about learning to do more with less in the toughest environments imaginable. And that knowledge directly informs what we can do better right here.
That's a fascinating connection. Bridging space tech with earthly sustainability really shows how far-reaching this stuff is. Okay, so from the moon, let's zoom way out to the very fabric of space-time itself. 10 years ago, September 14, 2015, a landmark discovery that truly changed how we see the universe. The first detection of gravitational waves by LIGO, that's the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory. It's just incredible to think about. So a decade after that breakthrough, how has our view of the universe fundamentally shifted? Have there been any, really surprising findings or maybe lingering mysteries from these wave observations that genuinely challenge what we thought we knew?
Well, to put LIGO in context, it isn't just about spotting these tiny ripples in space-time. It's fundamentally reshaping our cosmic origin story. It's showing us how the elements that make up us, you, me, everything, how they were actually forged in these cosmic events. This detection, back in 2015, it confirmed a major prediction of Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity, something that had just been theory for 100 years.
A century. Wow.
Right. It literally opened a new window for observing the universe. It complements, the traditional way we look through light, radio waves, X-rays, the whole electromagnetic spectrum. And what's really striking is how it shifted our perception. Before LIGO, we could only see the universe. Now we can kind of hear it. We're sensing these violent collisions of massive objects, things we couldn't see before.
Like what kind of things?
Well, for instance, we've detected waves from merging black holes, and some of them were far more massive than anyone really expected, like 50, even 80 times the mass of our sun. That challenges our models of how stars evolve and collapse. And maybe even more spectacularly, we detected gravitational waves from neutron star collisions. Neutron stars, okay. Why are those so important? Because those events, those collisions, are believed to be the cosmic factories, the places where heavy elements like gold and platinum are created.
So the gold in my ring might have come from colliding neutron stars?
That's the idea. The very elements we value on Earth that even find in our bodies likely forged in these incredibly violent events billions of years ago. And LIGO's success, it hasn't happened in isolation. It spurred massive international collaborations. You've got facilities like Virgo in Italy, Kagero in Japan, working together. That enriches the data set, gives us a much clearer multi-point picture of these cosmic events. Scientists are anticipating even more discoveries, things that will unravel more mysteries. It really solidifies LIGO's importance in modern astrophysics. The lingering mystery, well, we still don't fully get what happens at the exact moment black holes merge, or the full range of sources out there producing these waves. We've basically just opened the door.
That's a truly mind-bending thought, how the elements that make up us were forged. Connects us to the cosmos in such a profound way. Okay, shifting gears now, and it's a stark reminder that behind every scientific leap forward, there are human beings. And sometimes the pressure involved can be immense, even deadly. Our sources reveal a tragic side to this pursuit of knowledge, specifically looking at China's academic system. The recent deaths of 3 prominent young scientists, people like Du Dongdong and Huang Kai, have really cast a harsh light on the country's academic environment. It raises a profoundly important question, doesn't it? What insights do our sources offer maybe on how societies can grapple with these kinds of extreme pressures? Or what dangerous pitfalls are we seeing?
Yeah, this really brings up a critical question about the global pursuit of innovation. At what cost? At what cost do we push for scientific breakthroughs? Finding that balance between ambition and well-being, it's just crucial for sustainable progress. Experts are highly critical of the Chinese academic system. They describe it as intensely competitive, incredibly high stress. And this pressure, it can push young scholars into really precarious situations. A key factor seems to be the up or out tenure system. It basically compels researchers to meet these incredibly stringent benchmarks, publish X papers in Y journals, or risk losing their positions entirely.
So it's constant pressure, a high-stakes sprint.
Exactly. And the problem gets worse because of a severe funding crisis. You have more and more PhD graduates vying for positions, but the funding opportunities aren't keeping pace. They're dwindling. That just intensifies the rivalry for grants, for tenure, for everything. And the consequences, they're alarming. Our sources report a rise in academic-related suicides. Many people are attributing these tragedies directly to these intense work-related pressures. Scholars are now calling for significant reforms. They argue there needs to be better support for young researchers. The current framework, they say, seems to prioritize sheer output, sheer numbers, over the well-being and mental health of these brilliant minds. China's drive for scientific innovation is undeniable. The results are impressive on the global stage. But it's becoming clearer that the human cost might be unsustainable. For societies grappling with this, the path seems to involve fostering environments that value collaboration over cutthroat competition, prioritizing mental health support, offering diverse career paths beyond just publish or perish. Without those kinds of changes, the well of scientific talent, and frankly, just basic humanity, is going to suffer.
It's a stark reminder indeed. Even the pursuit of knowledge has its human costs. Okay, shifting from those silent pressures within academia, the geopolitical sphere often presents even more immediate, devastating human costs. Let's turn now to the intensifying crisis in Gaza. Our sources paint an extraordinarily grave picture. You raised a critical point earlier about the effectiveness or maybe ineffectiveness of international frameworks. What do our sources suggest? What are the biggest roadblocks? Or are there any glimmers of hope for how these systems are working or not working in a crisis like Gaza?
Yeah, this deep dive into the Gaza situation reveals a crisis with so many layers: humanitarian, diplomatic, deeply political. And it absolutely raises serious questions about how effective our current international frameworks really are when it comes to protecting civilians and mediating peace. One of our sources, Cherevko, notes that Gaza City in northern Gaza has effectively been dealt a death sentence. Hundreds of thousands forced to flee, heading south to areas already dangerously overcrowded, all amid relentless violence. The reports mention the smell of death, the scattered remnants of lives lost in the ruins. It paints a truly poignant, devastating picture.
Absolutely, those descriptions are harrowing. And yet, despite widespread international condemnation, the violence continues. What are the sources suggesting about the real levers of power here? Why have diplomatic efforts seemed so ineffective?
The sources point to several critical roadblocks. First, there's just deep mistrust between the main actors involved. Plus, you have the highly factionalized nature of regional politics. That makes direct mediation incredibly difficult. Second, the sheer scale of the humanitarian catastrophe is just overwhelming. Even well-intentioned international aid efforts face constant obstruction, delays, reportedly by Israeli authorities. Our sources detail the tireless efforts of local healthcare workers, humanitarian agencies. They're operating under incredibly perilous conditions, just struggling against this tide. Cherevko, for instance, shared this tragic story. Her 8-year-old cousin was killed in an airstrike while waiting in line for bread.
Oh, that's just horrifying.
It highlights the indiscriminate nature of the conflict, its devastating impact on children, who are always the most vulnerable. And Cherevko's call to the international community was really clear. The citizens of Gaza aren't seeking charity. They're asking for their fundamental rights, the right to live in safety, in dignity, in peace. She urged global leaders not to overlook the pressing need for humanitarian action before it's genuinely too late. The effectiveness of international frameworks. It's severely tested when powerful nations or blocs are maybe unwilling to apply consistent pressure, or when humanitarian principles seem to take a backseat to geopolitical calculations.
And the situation for those who have fled, those displaced, it's just as dire, isn't it? Even in areas supposedly designated as safe, like Al-Mawasi in the south. Reports suggest it's tragically anything but safe. People facing famine, lack of shelter, clean water, medical supplies, to the point where some are apparently contemplating trying to go back north. A reverse displacement, despite the costs, the danger, because the conditions in the south are that unbearable.
Precisely. Thousands of Palestinians are fleeing Gaza City daily, heading towards Al-Mawasi, an area described as already overcrowded, critically under-resourced. You mentioned around 900,000 Palestinians remained in Gaza City, but that number is rapidly decreasing, just intensifying the crisis in the south. And yes, many are finding Al-Mawasi, initially flagged as a safe zone, is far from it. They face imminent famine, severe lack of basic necessities, shelter, water, medicine. And yes, some are even considering that perilous journey back north, that reverse displacement, because the conditions in the designated safe areas are simply so dire.
This a whole complex situation that's also causing immense internal political pressure within Israel itself, right?
That's right. We're seeing reports that families of hostages are accusing Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of being the main obstacle to bringing their loved ones home. They allege his actions are sabotaging potential deals. This internal criticism, it gets amplified by regional events. For example, there's an Israeli airstrike targeting a meeting of Hamas officials in Doha, Qatar. That resulted in the deaths of 5 Hamas members and a Qatari security official. This incident definitely intensified criticisms towards Netanyahu, both domestically and internationally, leading to widespread condemnation, including from the UN Security Council.
And that strike in Qatar, it clearly prompted a strong regional reaction.
It certainly did. Leaders from Arab and Islamic nations convened in Qatar for an emergency summit. We saw Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, all there. Their stated mission to formulate a collective response to what they termed state terrorism by Israel. They were drafting a resolution condemning Israel's actions, exploring potential economic measures. But the discussions weren't just about Gaza. They also touched on ongoing aggression in Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Yemen. The whole region feels interconnected. Qatar itself is apparently seeking new security arrangements with the United States. However, the U.S.'s continued strong support for Israel complicates these dynamics, especially for potential normalization agreements, like with Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrived in Israel for talks amidst all these heightened tensions, reinforcing American support, yes, but also navigating these immense complexities. He's said to discuss military actions, the humanitarian crisis, addressing concerns from allies like Romania. Internationally, you see protests like in Berlin, Germany, urging an end to arms exports to conflict zones, calling for diplomacy. And Italy urged Israel to respect the rights of activists involved with the Gaza flotilla trying to break the blockade.
Okay, wow. That's a lot to take in. From literal drones crossing borders to debates over whose money is whose. The Ukraine conflict clearly has ripple effects far beyond the front lines, and these ripples, they're increasingly shaping that delicate dance between the world's two largest economies, the U.S. and China. Let's delve into the Ukraine-Russia war now. It continues to generate these spillover effects and shift international support.
Yeah, the complex interplay here. Military action, economic pressure, information warfare. It's truly striking. That detail about the kill list, including a 3-year-old, that's a particularly stark, chilling example of how deeply entrenched these narratives can become. Our sources detail multiple NATO airspace violations recently. Poland, for example, accused Russia of deliberately violating its airspace with drones. They tracked, I think, 19 incursions over just 7 hours, shot down 3 of them. Russia, predictably perhaps, dismissed the accusations as hysteria.
And Poland wasn't alone in this, right? Another NATO country was affected.
No. Romania also became the second NATO country to detect Russian drones in its airspace, apparently during an attack on neighboring Ukraine. They scrambled fighter jets in response. But this highlighted some internal tensions within NATO. U.S. President Donald Trump apparently minimized the Polish incident, referring to it as potentially a mistake. That reportedly sparked dismay, confusion among some NATO allies in Europe. They interpreted it as maybe a lack of firm commitment to collective defense under Article 5. Critics voiced that the perceived U.S. absence in direct military responses heightened their sense of insecurity. So zooming out, these drone incursions, the varied reactions, they expose potential cracks in NATO's unified front, particularly around perceptions of U.S. leadership and commitment.
And beyond the skies, there's also the economic warfare dimension still very much at play.
Absolutely. President Donald Trump announced readiness to impose new energy sanctions on Russia, but there was a contingent on all NATO nations stopping the purchase of Russian oil. That's a big ask. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky echoed this, urging stronger, more unified actions. On Ukraine's offensive side, they continue to target Russian resource supply chains. For instance, hitting the Bashneft facility in Russia, the Kremlin described it as one of the largest in the nation, producing over 150 different oil products.
And there's new support coming in for Ukraine's own missile production capabilities, isn't there? Something happening in Denmark.
Yes, that's right. Denmark is hosting a missile fuel production facility for Ukraine. It's operated by a Ukrainian firm called Firepoint, located near Skridstrup Air Base. This facility will produce solid rocket fuel specifically for Ukraine's long-range Flamingo missiles, which reportedly have a range of up to 3,000 kilometers.
3,000 kilometers, that's significant range.
It is. Russia, of course, condemned this development, calling it Denmark sponsoring Ukrainian terrorism, claiming it just exacerbates tensions and endangers any diplomatic resolution.
Now, this next detail you mentioned, it's truly chilling. A 3-year-old Russian child, blacklisted on the Mirod Vorets website. Just for context, that's a controversial platform, sometimes linked to Ukrainian state security services. It publishes personal data of people it considers threats or enemies of Ukraine, often called a kill list because of the danger associated with being named.
Indeed. This child was accused of border violations. It's drawn significant condemnation from Russian officials, naturally, who claim it incites hatred. Several other minors, including a 5-year-old, were also reportedly added. It's a particularly stark example, as I said, of how deeply entrenched narratives can become, blurring lines, raising serious ethical questions about information warfare and the targeting of civilians, regardless of age. It's deeply troubling.
And in another concerning development, we're seeing alleged sabotage concerns emerging in Georgia, a country with pretty strategic geopolitical importance.
Yes. Georgian authorities arrested 2 Ukrainians found with 2.4 kilograms of hexogen. Just for context, hexogen is an explosive, even more potent than TNT, often used in military applications. It was reportedly supplied by Ukraine's security service, the SBU. Investigators are looking into the motive. Were the explosives intended for sabotage operations inside Russia? Or perhaps to disrupt upcoming local elections in Georgia, which are scheduled for early October? Georgia's location is key here. It's near a major pipeline supplying Russian gas to Turkey. That adds complexity. Moscow has made accusations in the past regarding Ukrainian sabotage attempts in the region.
And finally, on Ukraine, the financial strains are clearly immense, and debates over international aid seem to be intensifying.
The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, is warning Ukraine faces a significant funding gap, potentially needing an additional $10 to $20 billion beyond current estimates. Ukraine allocates something like 60% of its entire budget just to wartime expenditures. It's heavily reliant on Western aid for essential services, pensions, public sector wages, things like that.
And the sources of that aid are shifting.
Our sources note a shift, yes. U.S. contributions have reportedly declined since President Trump returned to office. The European Union seems to be emerging as the primary financial backer now. There's also this significant ongoing debate about using the profits generated from around $300 billion in frozen Russian assets. The G7 is exploring this possibility, but it sparks huge debate over legality, the risks involved, potential retaliation. Russia naturally criticizes it as robbery and a violation of international law.
Okay, shifting focus now to the 2 global giants. U.S.-China relations, always a delicate dance, isn't it? Trade, technology, regional influence, it's all intertwined. High-level discussions have apparently started in Madrid, Spain, focusing on trade disputes and that looming deadline regarding TikTok.
Yeah, this really brings up that important question about modern diplomacy. Can you even separate economic interests from national security concerns anymore, or have they become just inextricably linked? China has reportedly asserted that TikTok continuing to operate in the United States is essential for making progress in these broader trade talks.
Using TikTok as leverage, essentially.
It seems that way. It clearly highlights the intricate relationship between trade negotiations and this hugely popular Chinese-owned social media platform, which, as we know, faces intense U.S. national security concerns, data privacy, potential influence operations, all that. And just ahead of the Madrid meeting, China announced its own retaliatory moves: anti-dumping and anti-discrimination investigations into U.S. semiconductor imports, challenging U.S. measures that Beijing sees as harmful to its tech industry. It's very much a tit-for-tat escalation we're seeing.
So it's not just the big players like the U.S. and China reevaluating their positions. Smaller nations are also making strategic choices, aligning themselves for stability and economic future. You mentioned Laos in Southeast Asia.
That's right. Laos has joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO, as a dialogue partner. It's a move that signals some dissatisfaction with the existing ASEAN bloc, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Analysts see it as a kind of survival strategy, a pragmatic response to perceived limitations within ASEAN. By aligning with the SCO, which was founded by China and Russia, and also includes India and Pakistan, Laos aims to diversify its international partnerships, secure economic advantages. This comes particularly as U.S. engagement in the region perhaps diminished under the previous administration, creating something of a vacuum. This move effectively creates an alternative coalition, one that counterbalances Western influence. And it could signal challenges for ASEAN's unity going forward if smaller member states increasingly look towards Beijing and Moscow for partnerships.
Now let's move to Northeast Asia. North Korea's nuclear ambitions continue to cast this long shadow, leading to a constant cycle of regional drills and condemnations. Kim Yo-jong, sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, has once again condemned upcoming joint military drills. These involve the U.S., Japan, and South Korea, labeling them dangerous and a reckless show of strength.
Yeah, what's really striking about this particular issue is the cyclical nature of the tensions. It feels like a feedback loop. The perception of provocation by one side leads to escalation, which then justifies further military development by the other side. North Korea perceives these trilateral drills, the ones named Freedom Edge, as rehearsals for potential nuclear strikes against them. And so that perception prompts them to accelerate their own military modernization efforts. Kim Jong-un himself has been seen visiting weapons research facilities recently, emphasizing advancements in both nuclear and conventional military capabilities.
And it seems North Korea is also trying to solidify alliances elsewhere, potentially leveraging other global conflicts.
Indeed. Kim Jong-un appears to be leveraging the current geopolitical landscape, particularly the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, to solidify military alliances. Our sources mention reports that North Korea has actually sent troops to bolster Russia's efforts in the region.
Sending troops, that's a significant step.
It is, and they've reportedly established a mutual defense pact with Russia. Unsurprisingly, Park Jong-chon, a senior North Korean official, has warned of forthcoming countermeasures from Pyongyang if the Allied forces persist in their joint military displays. It signals a pretty challenging escalation in tensions on the Korean peninsula.
Further south, India continues its complex balancing act, maintaining strong ties with Russia, even amidst Western pressure. It really paints a picture of a multipolar world, doesn't it? Countries like India carefully navigating their own interests rather than just picking one side.
Absolutely. The Russian Foreign Ministry has openly praised India's commitment, praised them for continuing and even expanding cooperation with Moscow, despite that Western pressure to sever ties. They characterize the partnership as strategic and reliable. And current collaborations are diverse. They span civilian and military sectors, nuclear power, space missions. Both nations are apparently working on enhancing their financial systems and logistics routes, aiming for long-term independence from external pressures. Now, tensions have risen recently due to U.S. tariffs on some Indian goods linked to India's energy imports from Russia. India described those tariffs as unfair. And while bilateral trade deal negotiations between the U.S. and India have resumed, India remains firm on key agricultural concessions. It indicates this complex balancing act where India prioritizes its national interests and maintains strategic autonomy above all else.
Okay, moving to Africa now. A significant development seems to have unfolded with a peace deal between the Democratic Republic of the DR Congo and Rwanda, facilitated by the United States apparently, aiming to revamp mineral supply chains and stimulate investment.
Yes, and this immediately raises that important question about the so-called resource curse. Can international involvement, even if it's well-intentioned, truly break the cycle of conflict that's so often tied to valuable minerals? Especially without addressing the underlying governance issues. There's a draft economic framework that outlines cooperation with third parties, including the U.S. It talks about regulatory reforms, attracting private sector investment, reducing illicit trade, increasing transparency. Key measures include things like third-party inspections at mine sites, establishing cross-border economic zones.
That sounds promising on paper, definitely, but I imagine the implementation, that's the real challenge, isn't it, given the history in that region?
Absolutely. Huge concerns remain about the implementation timeline, mainly due to ongoing security issues, stalled peace processes. You still have troops and armed groups present in the region. The agreement asserts each nation's right to control its own mineral resources, while also aiming to prevent funding for armed groups, striving for a more robust industrial mining sector. But the path to achieving that is incredibly fraught with challenges. Given the volatile history, the deep-seated issues of governance, illegal mining, which often fuel these very conflicts the deal aims to solve.
And finally, within the Middle East, Israel and Turkey, once strong partners, now navigating a particularly precarious balance. That analysis really highlights how quickly regional tensions can ignite, pulling in former allies, creating new flashpoints. It's almost a microcosm of how global events, seemingly distant, can profoundly impact domestic stability and societal divisions elsewhere.
It's exactly. To put it in context, it demonstrates how actions in one part of the Middle East can rapidly destabilize alliances and create new regional flashpoints, far beyond the initial conflict zones. That Israeli airstrike targeting a Hamas meeting in Doha, Qatar, it's raised alarms in Turkey. Ankara now fears it could be the next target for Israeli military action. The Turkish Defense Ministry spokesman, Rear Admiral Zeki Akturk, expressed concerns publicly. Concerns that Israel's aggression, exemplified by that strike in Qatar, could escalate further, endangering not only Turkey but the entire region. Relations between Israel and Turkey, historically strong partners, remember, have deteriorated significantly since the start of the Gaza conflict back in October 2023. And these tensions now threaten to engulf neighboring countries. Turkey's leadership is calling for vigilance, reinforcing defense measures. It's a very tense situation.
Okay, let's turn our attention inward now, to the domestic front in various countries, where political shakeups and societal divisions are playing out, sometimes with intense, even tragic consequences. We have to discuss the Charlie Kirk assassination, an incident in the United States that sent absolute shockwaves across the political spectrum.
Yes, this tragic event really forces us to confront the growing polarization in political discourse and that dangerous line between heated rhetoric and actual real-world violence. It also raises that important question. How do we as a society grapple with extremist ideologies regardless of where they originate on the political spectrum? So the incident itself, conservative activist Charlie Kirk was fatally shot while speaking at a campus event in Orem, Utah. A suspect, Tyler Robinson, 22 years old, was arrested. His father apparently recognized him in surveillance footage, which led to his surrender. Robinson is reportedly not cooperating with authorities, though he apparently admitted responsibility to some acquaintances on Discord.
And the motive. That seems to be where the conflicting accounts and political interpretations are already swirling.
The motive is definitely still under scrutiny. But some details are emerging, and they do highlight that ideological divide. Robinson's transgender roommate is cooperating with the FBI, which might shed light on his motivations. A rifle found nearby was apparently inscribed with anti-fascist slogans and other messages. Utah Governor Spencer Cox, who is a Republican, described Robinson as deeply indoctrinated with leftist ideology, though there are conflicting claims from Robinson's family about their own Republican allegiance. So it's complex. Investigators are exploring whether the motives stem from anger towards Kirk's conservative views, particularly perhaps his views regarding the LGBTQ community and gender transition procedures.
The political reactions were swift, intense, reflecting the current climate. President Trump himself weighed in, didn't he?
He did. President Donald Trump praised the FBI director, Kash Patel, for the great job in apprehending Robinson, and he called for the death penalty for Robinson, which aligned with Governor Cox's indication of the state's likely actions. The incident has sparked just intense discussions about political tensions, ideological violence, the safety of public figures. The local community in Washington, Utah, is reportedly in disbelief. Furthermore, comments seen on social media celebrating Kirk's death sparked immediate backlash. Some critics faced severe repercussions, including losing their jobs. This raises serious questions about freedom of speech versus consequences, social media responses to controversial figures, and how quickly online rhetoric can unfortunately bleed into real-world violence and its aftermath.
It is unsettling how quickly political divides can escalate into such violence, and the online discussions often seem to just intensify those tensions rather than resolve anything. Speaking of immense human suffering, let's shift to the deepening crisis in Haiti. It paints a horrifying picture of gang violence and critically underfunded international aid.
Yeah, a crucial insight here is that stark contrast between the urgent calls for aid and the actual reality of the funding coming through. It certainly raises that important question about international responsibility. Is the global community truly committed to preventing state collapse in places like Haiti? The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, condemned this brutal massacre. At least 40 individuals killed in a fishing village north of Port-au-Prince, Haiti. It just reflects the escalating gang violence, the rampant lawlessness gripping the country.
And the numbers involved, the scale of the need, it's staggering, underscoring a profound global neglect, it feels like.
6 million people in Haiti are in urgent need of assistance. 6 million. With 1.3 million displaced just due to violence and instability across the country. Now, despite a humanitarian appeal for $908 million, less than 10% of that has actually been funded.
Less than 10%.
Less than 10%. Guterres described the response as shamefully overlooked and woefully underfunded. He warned that if support remains this insufficient, up to 1.7 million people could receive no assistance at all. The UN is urging the international community to expedite support for a multinational security support mission to help the Haitian National Police try and reinstate some semblance of law and order. But that lack of funding remains a critical barrier.
Moving across the Atlantic, the United Kingdom is also grappling with significant societal divisions, particularly around immigration. London recently saw this massive surge of anti-immigration sentiment. Over 150,000 protesters, apparently, under the banner Unite the Kingdom, took to the streets.
Yeah, zooming out, these protests really highlight the deep and sometimes violent divisions within British society around national identity, around immigration. It's clearly a pivotal issue ahead of any future elections there. Demonstrators expressed concerns over the perceived societal economic impact of immigration. There were chants reported to reclaim the country. Controversial activist Tommy Robinson addressed the crowd, and even Elon Musk drew attention by advocating for a new UK government while at the rally, a move that drew, both praise and criticism depending on your political leaning. The rally, unfortunately, also led to clashes between demonstrators and police. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, made a bold stand afterwards, declaring Britain would never surrender to extremists who leverage national pride for violence. He condemned attacks on law enforcement, called for civil discourse, commitment to democratic values.
And it wasn't just contained to London, right? We saw similar sentiments playing out elsewhere in the UK.
No, not just London. There was also a significant protest outside the Tickle Trout Hotel in Lancashire, UK. About 100 people gathered there, protesting the housing of Afghan refugees in that hotel. A banner explicitly read, "Deport all foreign criminals." Now, the context is important. The hotel shelters Afghan individuals who actually aided British troops, and they now face credible threats from the Taliban back home. It highlights the complex, deeply human stakes involved in these debates, caught between national security concerns, humanitarian responsibilities, public sentiment.
Yeah, these events really show how these debates aren't just abstract parliamentary discussions. They're playing out very viscerally on the streets with real human consequences. Okay, heading further east now to Nepal. There's this powerful story of civic engagement emerging, particularly from Gen Z, the younger generation, literally shaping their country's leadership through, well, new digital platforms and old-fashioned street protests. What a heavy mantle, though, for the new PM to take on for just 6 months. Sushila Karki was inaugurated as Nepal's first female prime minister, committing to a 6-month interim term.
That's right. And her appointment follows the resignation of her predecessor, Khadga Prasad Oli, which came amidst recent deadly protests. Reports mention at least 72 fatalities. Those protests were fueled by widespread public discontent over corruption, economic instability, perceived mismanagement. Karki emphasized the urgent need for national unity, cooperation, and particularly engaging with that younger generation, Gen Z. They've been at the forefront, apparently even using platforms like Discord to help coordinate actions, including, reportedly, the selection process for the new prime minister.
Using Discord to pick a PM, that's something.
It is. Now, with only a limited 6-month term, Karki faces immense pressure to make impactful decisions quickly. Those significant lasting reforms might be challenging in that time frame. International human rights organizations are warning of potential setbacks. It underscores the delicate balance needed between stability and reform in a nation clearly hungry for change.
Now, moving to a different kind of accountability, echoes of the Jeffrey Epstein case continue to reverberate, touching on powerful figures. Virginia Giuffre, a prominent victim in the Epstein abuse case, has renewed serious allegations against Prince Andrew, claiming sexual abuse on 3 separate occasions.
Yeah, what's striking about this issue is the long tail these high-profile cases have. They just keep raising fundamental questions. Questions about power, privilege, whether justice is truly equal for everyone, regardless of their social standing or connections. Giuffre's family is advocating for a thorough, transparent investigation, emphasizing the need for accountability, even for high-profile figures like Prince Andrew, who has consistently denied any wrongdoing. Furthermore, Giuffre's brother expressed strong opposition to Peter Mandelson's prior appointment as an ambassador, stating he should never have been given the position due to connections that, in his view, raise questions about suitability, especially concerning Epstein. These incidents, they just fuel those ongoing discussions about public trust and political leadership, the justice system's effectiveness with powerful individuals, and the critical importance of believing and supporting victims.
It really seems that even something as traditionally nonpartisan as, say, a presidential library or even the Federal Reserve can get caught up in the political crossfire these days. It just goes to show how intertwined everything feels. Let's look at some of the U.S. domestic political tensions making headlines.
Indeed. Take former President Joe Biden's team. They're looking to raise somewhere between $200 and $300 million for his planned presidential library. But many top Democratic donors are apparently hesitant.
Hesitant. Why?
Well, the sources suggest it stems from frustrations over his failed re-election bid and dissatisfaction with his inner circle. Some donors reportedly even want refunds for contributions that were redirected to Kamala Harris's campaign after she became the Democratic nominee. It highlights a clear disconnect with his post-presidency plans and maybe a shifting landscape within the Democratic donor base itself.
And the Federal Reserve, the Fed, is also feeling the heat, caught between economic policy and political pressure.
Oh, definitely. The Fed faces significant political turbulence, due in part to current President Donald Trump's attempts to assert influence over its operations. As key interest rate decisions are anticipated, questions are arising about the Fed's independence. And the uncertain status of 2 board seats adds to that. Observers note the Fed seems to be trying desperately to avoid triggering a recession, fearing public blame, perhaps a threat to its cherished autonomy. all while navigating intense political pressures from both sides of the aisle, particularly concerning inflation and overall economic stability. It's a tough spot.
There's also controversy surrounding the current administration's deportation policies, specifically involving Ghana.
Yes. A federal judge has raised serious concerns about the Trump administration's approach to deportations, specifically claiming the government might be circumventing federal court orders designed to protect migrants. Allegations surfaced that individuals were being routed through Ghana, potentially exposing them to risks like torture or even death upon return to their home countries. This underscores the ongoing legal, ethical battles around immigration policy and human rights, with critics on the left decrying what they see as inhumane practices, while supporters on the right emphasize national security and border control.
And finally, a clear breakdown in communication between federal and local government, even on crucial safety initiatives.
It seems so. The mayor of Memphis indicated he learned about the National Guard's planned deployment for anti-crime efforts in his city from President Donald Trump's televised address.
He found out on TV.
Apparently. It highlights a significant communication gap between federal announcements and local government officials actually on the ground. It's a stark example of how coordination can falter, even on critical public safety initiatives. Raises questions about efficiency, respect for local autonomy.
Okay, let's transition now to the pulsing economic currents, the ones shaping markets, real estate, consumer shifts around the globe. Our sources are indicating rapid shifts in global interest rate adjustments, signaling a potentially turbulent period for international finance.
Yeah, this really brings up that important question about global economic coordination. Can central banks actually navigate these interconnected pressures without causing unintended ripple effects across different national economies? It's a huge challenge. Over a rapid, 36-hour period recently, significant monetary policy changes were observed internationally. It just signals how interconnected global financial markets truly are. Analysts are interpreting these shifts as responses to ongoing inflationary pressures, economic uncertainties. The prevailing prediction seems to be that the first U.S. interest rate cut will likely occur sometime in 2025, aimed at stimulating economic growth. These developments will undoubtedly impact investment strategies, market responses worldwide, affecting everything from mortgage rates for homeowners to stock market performance for investors.
And closer to home, in Europe, France has just received a record low credit score. That's not just a number, is it? It reflects deep political, economic challenges impacting daily lives for millions.
Exactly. Fitch Ratings downgraded France's credit rating from AA down to A+. Spiel there. That might sound like just a letter change, but for nations, it signals a significant increase in perceived risk for investors. It could directly raise borrowing costs for the country itself. Fitch cited growing political instability, uncertainty surrounding the government's efforts to address rising debt, and a significant budget deficit. The deficit is projected at 5.4 to 5.8%, which is well above the European Union's 3% limit. The recent ousting of Prime Minister François Bayrou after a failed confidence vote on a massive $44 billion austerity plan really highlights this political fragmentation. It undermines the government's ability to implement effective fiscal consolidation. This downgrade could raise borrowing costs for France, as I said, and potentially prompt other credit rating agencies to follow suit, leading to further financial complications and potentially impacting the cost of living for average French citizens.
Okay, shifting over to Asia. Real estate dynamics in Seoul, South Korea, and Hong Kong offer a fascinating look at how different governments are trying to manage their housing markets.
Yeah, a crucial insight here is seeing how different governments are trying to manage housing markets when faced with these huge flows of global capital. And it raises that important question. Can local policy really control a market that's so heavily influenced internationally? South Korea, for example, they implemented new restrictions on foreign home buyers, trying to cool down rising housing prices, especially in Seoul and the surrounding areas. This particularly targets Chinese investors who apparently acquired nearly 97,000 properties over the last decade, sparking concerns about affordability for local residents.
So what are these new rules in South Korea, and how are they actually impacting the market? Is it working?
Well, the new rules mean foreigners now need prior approval before buying. And crucially, they must occupy these homes for at least 2 years. The aim is to reduce speculative buying, flipping properties. Experts are divided on the impact, though. Some believe it will cool prices. Others argue that domestic factors are the primary drivers of the market, and there's a looming apartment shortage that could sustain upward pressure regardless of foreign investment levels. Meanwhile, over in Hong Kong, the property market is showing more cautious sentiment. Recent developments from major players like Henderson Land Development, Swire Properties, they've shown kind of muted sales, indicating home buyer sentiment is still recovering there. Developers are pricing new projects competitively, sure, but buyers seem to be anticipating further discounts, holding back a bit. However, there are some potentially positive signs on the horizon for Hong Kong. Decreasing inventory, anticipated interest rate cuts for the U.S. Federal Reserve eventually, and rising rents. That offers a cautiously optimistic outlook for investment demand in the longer term.
All right, let's explore some consumer trends and industry shifts now, from cars to clean fuel, even quantum computing. It's clear innovation and economics are always driving change, sometimes with a side of political drama mixed in. First up, this reported exodus of Tesla owners.
Slight chuckle. Yeah, it seems maybe the initial wow factor is wearing off for some Tesla owners, and the practicalities of ownership are becoming a bigger factor in consumer decisions now. A growing number of former Tesla owners are apparently expressing dissatisfaction, moving away from the brand. They cite rising costs, not just vehicle prices, but maintenance fees too. Also, a perceived decline in quality control and issues with customer service seem to be significant factors. It probably signals a maturing electric vehicle market where consumer expectations are evolving, moving beyond just the novelty and innovation to demanding reliability, value, good service, like with any car.
So, while Tesla faces maybe some headwinds, another brand seems to be gaining ground, shifting perceptions in the automotive industry, Kia.
Yes, Kia, the South Korean automaker, they're definitely on the rise, according to our sources. Consumer reports, user reviews, they consistently point to Kia vehicles gaining attention for strong performance, especially in terms of dependability, affordability, and just overall value for money. This is positioning Kia as a really serious contender in the mainstream automotive market, appealing to a wider range of consumers who prioritize practicality, long-term satisfaction, maybe over just cutting-edge tech.
Okay, moving over to India now, there's a controversy brewing around their ethanol policy, with accusations of corruption even reaching high levels of government.
Yes, Union Minister Nitin Gadkari had to address allegations of corruption, personal gain, amidst the government's big push for ethanol-blended petrol. He firmly dismissed the claims, asserting quite colorfully that his brain is worth his 200 crore a month, and that he earns his income honestly.
Slight chuckle. Okay, that's one way to put it.
It highlights a broader debate, though. Advocates of the policy argue it enhances fuel efficiency, reduces India's dependence on imported oil, promotes sustainable energy, and supports the agricultural sector, especially sugarcane farmers who supply the ethanol. Detractors, however, suggest the policy might disproportionately benefit particular individuals or specific corporate interests within the industry. It's a classic intersection of politics, economics, environmental policy, where intentions, outcomes, and potential conflicts of interest are always heavily scrutinized.
And looking way ahead now, the future of computing is always fascinating. Quantum computing continuously seems to be on the horizon.
Indeed. 4 specific stocks in the quantum computing space were identified in one source as having significant potential for future profits, though the source didn't name them explicitly, unfortunately. Now, commercial viability for quantum computing, it's still years away, possibly a decade or more for widespread practical application. But companies are heavily investing right now, pouring money into research and development to overcome the current, very significant technical challenges, and hoping to unlock these incredible new capabilities. It's definitely an area ripe for revolutionary breakthroughs, things that could transform entire fields, medicine, material science, finance, even if it's not quite ready for prime time for most businesses just yet.
Right. Now let's turn our gaze back to Earth's vital signs, the health of our planet. From climate trends to natural phenomena, the U.S. power grid seems to be facing a really significant challenge, a growing reliance on natural gas, largely driven by this unexpected demand surge from data centers.
Yeah, this is a crucial insight, highlighting that tension between technological advancement and our climate goals. AI's growth, artificial intelligence, while incredibly promising in many ways, is creating this massive energy footprint. And our current electrical infrastructure is really struggling to support that sustainably. The increasing electricity demands, particularly fueled by the burgeoning needs of these data centers powering AI, pose significant challenges, both for the stability of the U.S. power grid and for meeting climate goals. A recent analysis of utility plans reveals something quite stark. Companies are proposing to build significantly more natural gas capacity than previously thought, nearly doubling the estimates from just 18 months ago.
Doubling down on gas, that's a huge problem for climate targets, isn't it? It seems to fly directly in the face of efforts to decarbonize the grid.
It absolutely is. This shift raises serious concerns about integrating renewable energy sources like wind and solar, And it clearly exacerbates greenhouse gas emissions at a time when climate scientists say we should be rapidly decarbonizing. Data centers currently account for about 4.4% of total U.S. electricity use, which is already a lot.
4.4% just for data centers.
Right. And that figure is projected to increase dramatically, somewhere between 6.7% and potentially a staggering 12% by 2028. This rapid growth, often driven by massive tech corporations, is just outstripping the grid's ability to adapt quickly enough with clean energy.
So why aren't we just building more renewables faster then? What are the underlying barriers holding things back?
There are significant infrastructure and policy barriers, unfortunately. The grid itself, much of it is over 50 years old, it's often inadequate for integrating decentralized renewable energy sources, effectively things like rooftop solar, residential batteries. These are harder to manage than large centralized power plants. Utilities often default to natural gas. And it's not just inertia, there are deep structural reasons. Historical biases mean the gas infrastructure is already largely in place. Existing regulatory frameworks sometimes guarantee profits for utilities on large-scale fossil fuel projects. And economic incentives can make investing in gas appear safer or more straightforward for them compared to the sometimes more complex, politically fraught renewable energy projects like wind farms or large solar installations.
And who pays for all this new infrastructure?
That raises equity concerns too. The financial burden of energy infrastructure upgrades is typically spread across all consumers through their bills, with often scant consideration for the relatively limited number of jobs directly created by these highly automated data centers. Some states are creatively trying to restructure cost allocations to ensure these large energy users contribute more proportionally. Politically, there's also often a hesitancy in strongly advancing climate-friendly policies, coupled with a legislative environment that sometimes actively disfavors renewables. All this just quashes hopes for a smooth, rapid transition. Wow. Okay, shifting focus now. It's like something out of a science fiction movie, isn't it? This silent, unseen shift happening in our oceans that could have massive consequences down the line. Scientists are issuing warnings about a concerning marine phenomenon, specifically in the Mediterranean Sea. Indeed. Our sources describe a troubling increase in a particular, though unspecified, marine organism there. Divers have observed this dramatic surge. They used to see maybe 1 or 2 sightings per dive about a decade ago. Now they're reporting 15 to 20 sightings per dive.
15 to 20, that's a huge jump.
It's a dramatic uptick, and it poses potential environmental consequences, disrupting local ecosystems, altering the natural balance. While the exact organism isn't named in our sources, these kinds of population explosions can lead to problems like dead zones where oxygen is depleted, negatively impact fish populations, or introduce invasive species dynamics. Scientists are urging immediate attention, more research, more monitoring to assess the long-term effects on marine biodiversity and the local fisheries that depend on that ecosystem. It really highlights a kind of silent alarm bell ringing for the health of one of the world's most crucial marine environments.
And in Southeast Asia, Indonesia is facing that classic environment versus economy dilemma, this time concerning its nickel mining, a critical component for the global shift to electric vehicles.
Yes, and this truly raises that important question about the real cost of our green transition. Are we maybe just shifting environmental burdens, moving them from fossil fuels to other forms of resource extraction, often in biodiversity hotspots? Instead of genuinely moving towards truly sustainable practices across the board, Indonesia's government controversially lifted a suspension on the Gag nickel mine. It's located in West Papua, allowing it to resume operations right in the Coral Triangle region.
The Coral Triangle, isn't that known for incredibly rich marine biodiversity?
Exactly. It's renowned for it. Greenpeace Indonesia warned that resuming mining there could seriously endanger marine life, particularly fragile coral species. They also noted that previous mining activities in the area had already led to significant forest destruction.
But the Indonesian government claims the mine is compliant with environmental standards now. They gave it a green rating.
Yes. The environmental minister, Hanif Faisal Nurofik, stated that Gag nickel achieved a green rating after an audit, indicating compliance with environmental standards. However, Indonesia's nickel production is absolutely vital for the global electric vehicle market, which highlights its ongoing inherent tension between the economic demands of industrial development, especially for green tech materials, and the critical need for environmental preservation. It's a microcosm of that larger global challenge. How do we meet the surging demand for materials needed for a greener future without creating new environmental sacrifices in vulnerable ecosystems?
And just quickly, from fire tearing through homes to the earth rumbling beneath our feet, these events remind us of the powerful forces of nature, even as we navigate all this global politics and economic shifts. We've seen some recent natural events making headlines, too.
Yes, briefly. In Manila, Philippines, a significant fire erupted in a residential area. Required 14 fire trucks, residents evacuated to 2 centers. Fortunately, reports indicated no immediate casualties, but many families were displaced. Investigations into the cause are ongoing. Meanwhile, in San Diego County, California, in the United States, a 3.6 magnitude earthquake struck the eastern part of the county, caused weak to light shaking. Again, thankfully, no significant damage or injuries were reported, but it serves as that stark reminder of the region's vulnerability to seismic activity and the constant geological forces at play beneath us.
Okay, finally, let's explore some fascinating intersections of society and culture, from the world of sports getting political to pressing digital debates about privacy. Now, shifting gears to these fascinating intersections, it's a classic modern dilemma, isn't it? That desire to keep children safe clashing head-on with fundamental privacy rights. Where do you even draw the line? The European Commission is facing significant public outcry regarding its chat control initiative.
Yeah, this really raises an important question about the capabilities and maybe the limits of the technology itself. Can we truly scan for illicit content effectively without inevitably opening the door to broader, more intrusive surveillance that impacts absolutely everyone? The initiative aims to scan private messages, including images looking for potential child sexual abuse material, or CSAM. Critics argue this plan paves the way for invasive mass surveillance, undermining fundamental rights to privacy, data security for all citizens, not just suspected offenders, creating potential backdoors that could be exploited. Proponents, however, contend it's a necessary step, necessary to protect children from online exploitation, highlighting the undeniably growing issue of child abuse facilitated through digital platforms. It's a very, very difficult tightrope walk between security and civil liberties. And it has profound implications for digital freedom, not just in the European Union, but potentially setting precedents globally.
And it seems even our escapes, our sports, aren't immune to the intense political and environmental pressures of the world these days. From a cycling race being stopped mid-stage to cricket fans boycotting a major match, the real world definitely intrudes.
Chuckles. Indeed. The final stage of the prestigious cycling race, the Vuelta a España, was abruptly abandoned. Why? Because of an incursion of pro-Palestinian protesters right onto the course in Madrid, Spain. This disruption vividly illustrated that intersection of sports and political activism. Disappointing for spectators, sure, but it effectively used a high-profile event to raise awareness for a global issue. And in the world of cricket, hundreds of tickets for the highly anticipated India versus Pakistan Asia Cup match held in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, remained unsold. That's highly unusual for this incredibly fervent rivalry.
Yeah, normally that match is a guaranteed sellout, right? Why the low turnout this time?
It was attributed to a combination of factors. One was the soaring temperatures around 36 degrees Celsius, that's 95 Fahrenheit, plus high humidity, just making outdoor attendance pretty uncomfortable for fans. But crucially, political tensions between India and Pakistan also led some fans to actively boycott the event, signaling that, yes, real-world geopolitical issues can indeed overshadow even the most passionate sporting rivalries and spectacles.
We also have a couple of brief health studies that caught our attention. Some important implications there for personal choices, perhaps.
Yes, a Canadian study from the Create Fertility Center in Toronto, Canada, found that cannabis use, specifically THC, the psychoactive component, negatively impacts female fertility, particularly for those undergoing IVF treatment.
Negatively impacts how?
It showed lower rates of genetically healthy embryos resulting from IVF and increased rates of chromosomal errors in those embryos. This is a significant finding, especially as cannabis use becomes more normalized, more legalized globally. Many individuals, especially those trying to conceive, might be unaware of these specific risks. Experts involved are now strongly urging caution for women trying to start a family. It highlights a critical gap in public health awareness around this. On a more positive note, though, separate research indicates that jumping exercises, simple things like skipping or box jumps, can significantly contribute to increased bone strength and density, helping to prevent osteoporosis, particularly for younger individuals as they build bone mass. It's a simple, accessible way to proactively manage bone health throughout life.
And finally, a quick look at some crime and public safety news, revealing some pretty dark corners of the internet and highlighting persistent societal challenges.
Yeah, a truly chilling development reported from Russia. A court there has banned a website that was openly advertising contract killings.
Advertising.hitman online.
Apparently so, disguised horrifyingly as arranging workplace accidents or suicides. With prices listed ranging from 170,000 to 400,000 rubles, the sheer audacity, the depravity of such a service, especially its alarming reported accessibility even to minors, it just underscores the severe challenges authorities face in regulating the darkest corners of the internet and protecting vulnerable populations from extreme online content and real-world harm. Separately, in the UK, a victim of a racially aggravated rape publicly thanked her community for their support, her case highlighting broader societal issues of hate crime, the trauma involved, and the crucial need for prevention efforts and robust community support systems for victims in such traumatic situations.
So after all that, what does this all mean for you, our well-informed listener? We've journeyed from galaxies far, far away, across active battlefields, right into the heart of intense political debates, and even peeked at the future health of our oceans.
Indeed. From the profound scientific implications of gravitational waves, literally reshaping our understanding of the universe's origins, to the complex, multi-layered humanitarian crisis in Gaza and its impact on international frameworks, to the economic shifts influencing your daily life, whether it's interest rates or the price of goods, and that critical ongoing balancing act between security and privacy in our increasingly digital age, it's just abundantly clear our world is more interconnected and dynamic than ever before.
Yeah, the stories we've unpacked today, those space race challenges pushing for sustainable living beyond Earth, the drone incursions highlighting potential cracks in global alliances, the tragic human cost of extreme academic pressure, the fierce political divisions playing out so visibly in our societies, they're not isolated incidents, are they? They're all threads in this vast, intricate tapestry that's continuously shaping our shared reality.
And understanding these threads, starting to see the patterns, recognizing the underlying forces at play, that allows you, hopefully, to move beyond just passively consuming news headlines, to truly begin comprehending the world around you, equipping you with the context needed to form your own informed perspectives on these complex issues.
Our hope really is that this deep dive has given you some valuable insights, perhaps sparked a few aha moments along the way, and maybe even inspired you to look a little closer, dig a little deeper the next time you see a headline, knowing there's always more beneath the surface. So as we wrap up today, here's something to mull over. In a world where a global conflict in one region can literally stop a bicycle race on another continent, and where the demand for artificial intelligence can accelerate our reliance on fossil fuels, how might our collective choices, the big ones and the small ones, be inadvertently shaping the most unexpected corners of our shared planet, maybe long before we even notice the ripples spreading outwards? Keep asking those questions, keep digging deeper, keep seeking out those surprising facts and connections. Until next time, stay curious.
You're enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.